Welcome to the first Entuity Tech Talk of 2016. For those of you who are new to Entuity Tech Talks, these sessions are designed specifically for customers as well as technical members of our authorized partner community. Today, we're going to look at the brand new configuration management system that's introduced in Entuity 16. We'll be showing you 3 examples of how it can provide key automation of various configuration-related tasks. I did want to mention too that previous Tech Talk videos are available on demand on the Entuity Learning Center, located on the resources page at entuity.com. And you'll also find further information on the Entuity YouTube Center. They are all a good resource for learning about the product or reviewing features you now may be interested in implementing. I'm John Diamond, and I'm a Principal Solutions Architect at Entuity. And also with me today is my colleague, Pete Barr, who is a Field System Engineer. And we're going to be your hosts for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. A few housekeeping items before we get into today's content. We've put the call on mute mode to eliminate any outside noise. Feel free to ask questions at any time via the chat panel. We will have time at the end, I can assure you, to take questions that have been posted to that chat panel. So, let's get started. Today, we are talking specifically about the Entuity 16 product. This is because the feature at the focus of today's discussion was introduced in that version. This slide shows some of the enhancements of the last 2 revisions of Entuity Network Management. Just to give you a quick idea of what has been developed to keep our product current. We will also send you a complete list of the enhancements for your review as well, with the recorded link of this Tech Talk session. So let's begin and focus on the configuration management feature. The very first thing I'm going to tell you is that this feature is included with no additional license charge in every copy of Entuity 16. So it is a free extension. It's in the product, but it does need to be installed. Let me just show you on my user interface where you would check to see whether or not you actually got the configuration management capability installed. If you were to go to Administration, Entuity Health, then down to License Health, you're going to be able to see that you've got a configuration management option, and in my case, I've got it enabled. Now, by default, this wouldn't be enabled. If you do a straightforward upgrade or an installation without selecting any non-default modules, that would be disabled. You simply need to rerun the configure utility that's used when you're configuring the whole system and select the configuration management option from the list of available modules to enable it. But once again, everybody has this included in their 16.0 license. So, the product itself, this module, the configuration management, is provided to automate communication with devices that are under management. That's its primary role. And that communication would be via the command line interface of those devices. And so effectively, from the Entuity server, there will be an automated conversation at the command line level with devices, primarily, but not exclusively, for the purpose of applying configuration changes in an automated way. Now, obviously, in order to make that configuration work, the Entuity server has to be able to log into those devices that are under management. It therefore needs access to the credentials, the login credentials of those devices. Now, there are 2 different ways that they can be provided. The first way is via what we call a credential set, and that's configured at the moment via the component viewer. If you go into the component viewer, you'll see a folder labeled Credential Sets. If you go in here, you'll see that we've got one credential set already set up. If you don't see that folder incidentally, you can simply go to the server and choose the Create Credential Set option. But once you've got a credential set, it contains the username that will be used to log into a device.
Hey JD, I think I'm seeing a green screen. Screen.
Thank you very much, Pete. Here we go. I'm always guilty of not showing some of my screens. So just going back here, up at the top server level, you can create a new credential set if you don't see anything in the credential sets folder. But you can also, when you've got that folder, go here as well and create new credential sets. With a credential set, it contains the username and either one or two passwords, depending upon how many levels of login you have to go through to get to the appropriate level of the device to make changes. You've got a method which is either going to be Telnet or SSH. Now in reality, almost everybody is going to be using SSH to provide a secure login to their devices. We've got Telnet supported as well, and that's what I'm using today. And each credential set has a name. And a given credential set can be shared by multiple devices, which means that one change on the credential set will be shared amongst all of those devices as well. In this case, I have applied that credential set to some of my devices. And if I were to go in and show you my routers, one in particular, the Boston router, if I go in and edit that, you'll see down the bottom of the list, you've got a credential set. That is set to Ramsey, so that when we're going to talk to that router, it's going to use the Ramsey Lab credential set. Down here is where you would pick that from a list. If you've got multiple different credential sets, you could pick which one applies to that device. That is one way of providing the credentials in order to allow the logins to take place. I'll talk about the other method a little later on. So, the first thing to understand about the configuration management, once you've actually set up credentials, is that it provides a very extensible set of tasks that can be performed from the user interface. This can either be interactive or on a scheduled basis. So, for example, if I were to right-click on this router, you'll see that I've got a configuration management option, and under here are 4 tasks that have been set up. Now, by default, when you install 16.0, there won't be any tasks in the system, but we do have a set of example tasks that are provided that are very easy to install at the command line. If you go to the online help and search for scripting configuration management, the very first topic is how to install the examples that ship with the product. And the examples are what I'm actually going to be showing you today. Pete, in a little while, is going to take that further and show you how you can create your own tasks, which is what the whole system is designed to allow you to do. So, in the context of a device, if you are suitably authorized and there's a permission setting available at the user group level that determines whether members of that user group are allowed access to configuration management or not, here I've got 4 different operations I can perform at that device level on that device. For example, I could add a new community string. It will prompt me for the string to be added, and then it will go and apply that string automatically to the device. Now, if we've got the credential set already configured, as I showed you a moment ago, nowhere will it be prompting me for the credentials. Therefore, it will be automating the use of the login without exposing those credentials to the user. So the user can take advantage of a predetermined set of operations that they are allowed to perform without actually having to know the credentials to log into the device. Another example here is setting the system contact name that would be logged in the device. Now, I've shown you that at the device level. We've also got the ability to perform operations at the port level. If I were to bring down the context menu of a port on that device, you'll see an entirely different set of operations that are appropriate for the port as opposed to the device itself. Now, I've shown you how to perform an operation at the device and the port level. You can go further. For example, if I were to bring up all of the devices in that view, I could select a bunch of them and then call the configuration management menu from the context menu of that selected group, and then I would be able to apply these device level operations on all of the selected devices in one go. For example, I would be able to apply a new system contact name to all 4 of these devices in one operation. Likewise, if I was selecting a device, I could go to the ports menu and select a bunch of ports and apply configuration management operations on all of them in one go. There is another option, and that is available optionally for some selected tasks that you can control which ones they are at the view level. And for example, here we've got just one of those operations which is going to be allowed to take place at the view level. So I could set the system contact name for every device in that view if I wanted to. So that's how you would use the configuration management system in an interactive form. I want to take you now to how you would configure it. That's through the Administration Configuration Management option. And remember, you have to be authorized to be able to get at this function. These are 8 tasks that were included within that option, within the examples that were provided that I showed you how to install. And if I were to go to one of them, such as setting the system contact, and edit it to see how it is put together, you'll notice that apart from its name, the big aspect of the operation are a set of steps. Now these steps are carried out in the context that is selected. In this case, it's a device. So this is expecting to be operating at the device level. You could create one and set it to the port level, which is how those port tasks that I showed you a moment ago were configured. In this case, this is a very simple operation. It comprises 3 steps. First of all, you have to log into the device. Then you apply the system contact name, and then you log out. Each of these steps is defined separately. We'll get onto that in just a moment. In addition to that, it needs to know what system name to apply. And the way that is performed is that the parameter here has been defined. You can have multiple parameters, and this allows the system to prompt the user when using the operation for information. In this case, the user would be prompted for the system contact name before the whole task would be performed in that information. Okay, so we've got that, and then there's a bit of advanced information. First of all, these operations assume that things can go wrong, and there is a timeout that you can set that if the operation takes longer than that number of seconds, it will be abandoned. The connection method is where that credential set that I told you about in the first place came into play. By default, it will refer to the credential set that is associated with the device, if you've associated it, and that's an operation that you had to do. Alternatively, you could use the connection parameters. Now what that means is that instead of referring to the credential set, it will actually prompt you for the login details at the time you operate the command. It won't try and find it in the credential set, you'll be prompted. In addition, you have an option here to raise an event when the task completes. You don't have to have that happen. And there's some diagnostic information that you can collect for debug purposes. Now the filter is an optional field, and Peter's going to give you a very good example of its use in a moment. It allows you to have this task available for some devices or some ports, but not all. And you can apply an algorithm and logic as to which ones it's going to apply to and which ones it's not. I showed you how these configuration management operations can be available on the context menu of a device or a port. You don't have to have that available, but if that box is checked, then the task is available at the context level menu. And if you want it available at the view level, and if you remember, only one of my tasks was available at the view level, then that box needs to be checked to make that happen. If the box isn't checked, then it won't appear on the view context menu. And finally, there are a couple of other bits here. You can insist upon a confirmation dialog appearing so that you'll be challenged before the task is actually executed. And the last one is the maximum number of objects that can be selected in the menu, in the context menu. By default, that's 1. And so it will only allow one device or one port to be selected, and if you have more, then the task will not appear in the configuration management menu. Remember that one can catch you out. So that's all about tasks. Tasks run a number of steps. I'm quickly going to take you down to talk about steps. The idea of a step is that it contains a script, and the script controls interaction with a device. The login script is probably the most complex of all, and this is a good example of how to log into Cisco devices, but it can easily be extended to any other make and model of device. The idea being that it uses the script which is written in the Groovy language, and for those who aren't familiar with Groovy, it's an extension built on top of Java. You have all of the capability of the Java language, but it's implemented in a highly scriptable form. There's no compilation needed. We've also implemented an expect function. Now, expect is an industry standard way of automating command line communications, and we use that technique. We've implemented it in Groovy, and you can get the best benefits of both Groovy language and expect using this capability. And basically, it controls issuing commands to a device and then monitoring the responses that come back on the command line and making decisions based upon what responses come back. So this is setting up the login and performing the login operation. Now do bear in mind, when you're working with SSH, the login is actually performed by SSH itself. And so there's logic in here to see whether or not you're already logged in or whether or not you're being prompted to log in. And that will cover the difference, in fact, between Telnet and SSH. And various other operations. If we take the system contact, this is the only other one I'm going to show you right now. This is much simpler. And in order to change the system contact, in this case on a Cisco device, assuming that you've already logged in, then you would need to issue the configure terminal command. You would wait for the appropriate prompt to come back, the configuration prompt. You would then issue the SNMP server contact, followed by the contact name, which it's going to obtain from that parameter that it prompted from. And then finally, it's going to wait for the config prompt to be displayed again. And once all of that's happened, then if you remember, the third step that was called from the task was to log out. That's a very simple example, but as I always say, plagiarism is your friend in this case. Many operations that you want to perform, if they're very straightforward, like the one I've just shown you, you just copy an existing step and tweak it to perform the operation that you want to do. Use the ones that we've provided as examples. So, one other bit that I want to talk about here are the schedules. We allow you to schedule tasks to be performed at a later date or on a repetitive basis. You can create new tasks using this mechanism here, very much like running a report on a scheduled basis. What I will do is just quickly jump over to the help again, because we have got down here an enormous amount of information about the example scripts that we've provided, including all of the aspects of how to use the expect method and how to use the Groovy language that is provided in order to give you all of the flexibility to craft your own workflow automations. Now, with that said, it's time for Pete to actually show you how this works in practice. So I'll pass over to Pete, and then you'll be able to see the whole operation working for real. So Pete, take it away.
All right, thanks JD, and good afternoon everybody. And we'll give it a second for my screen to come up. There we go. All right, excellent. So I'd like to walk through a number of examples on how I've actually used some of the configuration management capabilities in 16 in my lab system. Some of the examples that I'll talk about today are ones actually that I've gotten from some of my previous experience, but also talking with some of our customers. So I thank you, all of our customers, for providing input and giving us good use cases on how to be able to use configuration management to solve problems. So the first one that I'd like to walk through is pretty straightforward. It's all about provisioning. So I've got a brand new group that I'd like to provision, but I'd like to do this in more of an automated fashion. So if I take a look at my configuration management tasks, you'll see that I've added a task here that's talking about using the company standard setting and actually provisioning a group of ports. Let's take a look at this task. It's pretty straightforward. It actually includes logging into a device, running a step that actually is doing the configuration to change those individual ports. And what you'll see here is that I'm leveraging two parameters. So as part of that provisioning process, I'm going to be setting that port description and a VLAN specific for that department. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go back and we'll take a quick look at the steps. And we'll go up to the configure switch port step here. So same type of thing. I'm doing this on Cisco equipment, so some of the commands here are going to be Cisco specific. Again, if you're leveraging other manufacturers, just using the command line syntax that would be specific for that manufacturer is what you'd want to be able to do. You'll see here that I'm actually passing in the parameters that I defined in my task. So I've got a parameter called port description and a parameter called VLAN number. The other thing that you'll notice is I'm leveraging some of the information that Entuity is already gathering, and that's actually the port description. So I'm actually, when I go into the UI and I select a port, I'm pulling the port description from the Entuity database and adding it into a port identifier variable right here. So this is where I'm actually using syntax from the Entuity data model to actually grab the actual port description that I'm going to use when I do the configuration work. So again, as JD mentioned, plagiarism is good when you're looking at doing this type of operation for other types of devices. Just cutting and pasting some of these can get you a long way. So let's actually go back and do the work. Let's take a look at one of my devices. I've got a switch in Minnesota that I've got a new group that I want to add to. And I'm going to pick port 11 to do this. So actually from the Explorer menu, I could do this from the left navigation menu as well. I'm going to right click and you see I've got a new task called provision ports. Now in my case, I want to do more than one at a time. So I can actually take this and I'm going to do port 11 through 15. So I'm going to shift click these, right click, and I don't see my menu. All right, something's going on here. So let's take a look at this. I know what this is. Let's take a look at my configuration task. Let's go down into the task itself and look at the Advanced tab. There it is. In the Advanced tab, you can limit the selections that can be picked at one time to make a configuration change. I've got this limited to one. I want to be able to do more than one at a time, so since I want to do this probably at a switch level, let's just set this to 50. It's a good arbitrary number. It'll handle a 48-port switch, and we'll make this change. All right, let's go back to the Explorer and try this again. So let's take port 11, let's go to port 15, and we've now got the right menu. This is bringing up the two parameters that I've defined. Just for ease of typing, I'm going to cut and paste the description that I want. And let's set the VLAN. So I'm done. I've submitted this for 5 ports. I can take a look at the history and I can watch this run. It's run really fast. So let's take a look at the details. And you can see that each one of these 5 ports have been set. If I take a look at the details for each one of these, you can see that I've got the correct description and I've got the correct access VLAN set up. So again, this is very straightforward to be able to set up and run. I can run it dynamically. At the point that I'm provisioning, I can add this into a process set when I'm deploying equipment and adding customers. Let's take a look at another example. In this example, we're going to do basically the opposite. I've got a customer down in Brazil. They're no longer using the switch that I need, so I'm actually going to deploy, I'm going to reset the switch configuration back to a default setting. The reason for that is I don't want to have people plugging into these ports and have them accidentally pick up the wrong VLAN. I've got PCI requirements. I've got other regulatory requirements where I need to make sure that if I'm not using a port, I set these things back. Now, I could go in and individually shut these down or change a VLAN if I wanted to black hole the port, or I could provision the individual ports. But in my case, I'm going to do this a little bit quicker. I'm going to actually run this as a configuration task and actually leverage a device-based task to reset a range of ports back to default. Let's quickly take a look at that one before we run it. And this is the reset range task. Again, I'm picking a step that's, just log into the switch. I'm doing a series of commands. I'm logging back out. In this case, I'm actually using 3 parameters. I'm picking the actual port type, and I'm defaulting this as a default value to be a fast Ethernet port. And I'm picking my starting and ending ranges for that range command. So let's take a look at the step. If I click on the step, here we go. And again, very basic syntax. I'm picking up a default range. I'm actually calling in and creating a string to take that interface range. So the parameter, that is the port type, I've got FA0 as a default type. I've got my slash, and I've got my range set up right here. So I've got a starting and an ending range, and I've added a dash in the middle to be able to give that range command. So again, very straightforward to do. This is one that, again, plagiarism is good to be able to run against. So let's actually run this, and I'm going to, in my case, I'm going to turn off ports 5 through port 11. So we'll just set the beginning and ending range. And if I wanted to change the port type, in case this happens to be a gigabit Ethernet port, I can change that as well. So I'm running this one. It's currently in progress. If I take a look at the details, it's still running. I can actually take a look at the details to see how far I am. What you'll see when this completes is that I've actually done that range command, and it's planted the right parameters in place for those individual ports. All right, one of the things that you'll notice, because I've actually got Entuity Configuration Monitoring running as well, is I've got some configuration incidents set up. So I'm tracking when I'm making configuration changes. Also, because I'm collecting the configurations, if I take a look at the Explorer, you can see that I've got configurations, different archives configurations that I can compare. And if I wanted to compare my starting and running configurations after I made a change, you can see this comparison as an example. So in my case, this is actually when I initially provisioned those individual ports. So you can see the before and after effect. And because I'm comparing my starting and running configuration, one thing that I notice is when I set my tasks up, I'm actually not writing my config out. So I'm not saving my configuration. In case that device reboots, I'm going to revert back to the original configuration and lose these changes. So one of the things that I might want to do is actually go in and copy my running configuration over. So I've got this set up as a separate task. You could certainly embed this command into some of the additional tasks as well. But I like to do some auditing before I actually write the config out, which is why I separated it here. Let's take a look at another use case. Now this actually is looking at configuration management a little bit differently. Instead of using it to provision configurations, I'm actually using the capabilities to go in and run commands on a device to actually expose the ability to show output. So in my case, I've got a requirement that says I want to be able to dynamically go in and look at all my OSPF neighbors. So Entuity monitors and continually monitors your OSPF configuration. You can look at your neighbor configurations. You can display this in terms of topology. But as a on-demand troubleshooting tool, one of the things that I want to be able to do is dynamically go in and do that show command and show me the resulting output. So I've got a task that does that. Again, log in, do the show command, log back out. If I take a look at the step that's actually doing this, you'll see that this again is very straightforward, where I'm going in and just doing a show IP OSPF neighbor command. Again, very straightforward to set up. One of the things, and JD mentioned this as well, is when I do a show OSPF neighbors, I don't want to do this on a switch. It's going to fail. So I want to be able to do this on something that's got routing capability, either a routing or a layer 3 switch that's got, an advanced services package running, so I can actually do layer 3 operations. If I take a look at the task again, and I look at the advanced tab, one of the things that you see is I added a filter. Now what this filter does is use a regex. So if I take a look at the capabilities, the system capabilities for the individual devices, if you look at your Explore menu and you scroll down in the Advanced tab, you'll see system capabilities, and you'll see either routing or you'll see routing and switching. So what I want to do is do a filter that says look at every device, and if the device system capabilities parameter, if that field in the database has a match to this routing parameter, so I'm using this as a comparison in a regex, include it. So only include in that filter things that can do routing. So again, we'll include this information as follow-up to the Tech Talk, but this is a real efficient way to limit and actually not have to deal with errors when I'm looking at a switch and trying to do, show IP OSPF neighbors commands. So one of the things here is, let's see, we'll hit cancel here. Let's actually run this. Now I can run this against an individual device. So this is a switch. Oh, and by the way, I can't see it because I'm filtering all my switches out. If I wanted to run this against a device, you would see it. So I can do it individually, but I can extend this a little bit more effectively and actually run this against a complete view. So I'm going to run this against a view, and you can see that I've submitted this for 4 out of the 5 devices that are in that view. So this one runs pretty quickly. You'll notice when we're taking a look at the details that it's going to go through each one of these, and you'll see that it doesn't actually do the switch because the switch is included effectively in the filter. Now let's take a look at this. In addition to running it manually, one of the things that I've done is set it up as a schedule. I wanted to run this command hourly just to get a current state of what my neighbors look like. So I set up a schedule. I took that schedule, I applied it to my view that's got just my routing devices in it, and I set it up to run hourly. Very quick to add, and once that schedule's in place, you can take a look at the history and actually drill into the individual history and see all the details and all the output. So each one of the devices will show, as well as all of the command output. I can copy and paste this if I need to stick it in an email for somebody, or I can just track it and maintain this historically for historical review. So it's a good way to take something that's a little bit more complex. You can set it up, run it manually. You can run it against an individual device. You can run it again against a view. And you can filter it to just have it run against the devices that it needs to. I'm going to sneak one more use case into our conversation today. Initially we were looking at 3, but this one is something that I've used historically, and it's something in talking to customers that I think you can all benefit from, or you may already have implemented if you're looking at some of the configuration management. In my system, I've got a number of devices, and one of the things that I've noticed is I've got a device that actually has a port that's been unplugged, and it really wasn't deprovisioned like it should. So if I take a look at that, it's actually, if I take a look at my historical events, you can actually see where this happened. I've cleared the event, but I've actually got a high utilization event going on. So I detected that event, and one of the things that you can do is actually from the event or from the incident, you can right-click, and I've created a very simple task that actually, and this is actually one of the tasks that is included with the standard configuration, is to actually shut that port down. So I'm seeing utilization on a port. That port should be inactive. It doesn't have a proper description on it. It's probably something that was, provisioned out of my system, but it wasn't actually admin down. So very easily, if I need to, shut the port down. So if I see a security incident or if I see something going on in the network, it's again very easy for me to be able to take that port and shut it down. I've got a syslog message here that actually is telling me that I shut the port. So I think with that, that's all I've got. JD, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Pete. Let's check the chat window to see if there are any questions. Pat, have you got anything for us?
Yes, we do. And the first question is configuration management integrated into the RESTful API as well?
And the answer to that is not yet, although I envisage that being a natural progression in the development of that API in the future. I haven't got any specifics on that yet, but it would be highly logical and a very worthwhile extension.
And then another question is there a way to provide a per task option to prompt for confirmation before executing a particular task?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a very important point because there are some operations that you would perform that naturally have wide-ranging consequences, and you probably want a little extra confirmation that you really did want to do it. Pete, in fact, as you've got the screen at the moment, do you want to go to the Advanced tab of a task?
Sure.
And we'll show the particular option there. Here we go. So on that Advanced tab, down the bottom, the Confirm Execution option. In fact, with that one there, do you want to just set it and show the effect of having that checked?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay, so Pete will now actually go in and perform that operation. And when selecting it...
Oh, hold on a second. I did it at the range level.
Okay.
Got to remember which task I applied this to.
There you go. That is the confirmation dialog that you would have to then confirm before you go ahead and operate. The default, by the way, if you just hit the Enter key, would be to say no. Okay, Pat, anything else?
Yes, and one last question. Which vendors other than Cisco are supported?
Well, the good news is pretty much everybody. The examples we provide focus on Cisco devices, but those are just examples. The whole configuration management mechanism is designed to be as generic as possible, using SSH and Telnet primarily for its communication. And any device that you can log into and make a change can be automated through the scripting mechanism. So this can be applied to pretty much anything.
And that's it for today.
Okay, there's something I did want to mention, and it's important to note. If you've got a deployment using multiple Entuity servers, where you've got a multi-server configuration, you've got a consolidation server that you would log into, and you can gain access to the information that's being monitored on multiple remote servers. You can use configuration management, and the really good bit of news here is that you only need to set it up on the consolidation server. The server that you've logged into is the one that actually initiates the operation, but it doesn't have to be the server that actually performs the communication. If you've got a device that is under management on a remote server, if you ask for a configuration management operation to be performed through the consolidation server, under the covers, and all the necessary information, including the script, is passed down to that remote server and is then performed on the relevant remote server or servers, because there might be multiple that are taking part in this. You don't have to go and configure up each and every one of those servers separately to accommodate all of this automation. You only have to do it on the consolidation server. One last thing, just to remind you, this capability, the configuration management module, is part of the base license in 16.0. Everybody is entitled to use it. All you have to do is enable it through configure. So, any more questions coming?
There was a question, what's the pricing model for Entuity? But that may...
What I would do is, as far as Entuity as a whole, I would refer you to the sales channel. As far as configuration management is concerned, the answer is it is free of charge. Everybody who upgrades to 16.0 or installs 16.0 has it as part of their license, zero charge. That's the pricing model. Well, thank you very much, Pat. Looks like that's it for the questions. However, do feel free to use the email address tech.talks@entuity.com for any questions you may have on this or any other related topic. We're also particularly interested in hearing from you if you've got a suggestion for a technical topic to focus on in a future Tech Talk. Here we go. So to wrap up, we're going to send you a video link of today's presentation for your use, and also do feel free to share it with your colleagues as well. If you've got any questions on configuration management, be sure to contact your Entuity field system engineer or just send us an email. And with that, I thank you very much for attending.